Ships don't measure speed in kilometers per hour or miles per hour, and the reason why is more interesting than you might expect. Have you ever wondered what the simple explanation is for using knots? Because on land, distance is simple. Cars use kilometers per hour or miles per hour. Trains do too, but ships don't, and surprisingly, airplanes don't either. So what's going on here? Why would two of the most advanced ways of traveling use a completely different system? You might think it's just an old tradition, something outdated that no one ever bothered to change, but the real story goes back hundreds of years to a time when sailors had no GPS, no radar, nothing out in the open ocean far from land. Knowing your speed wasn't just helpful, it was the difference between reaching your destination or getting completely lost. So sailors came up with a surprisingly simple solution. They used a rope with knots tied at regular distances. The knots were spaced very carefully so that when timed correctly, each one represented a specific distance. At the end of the rope was a small piece of wood, sometimes called a log, which they would throw into the water as the ship moved forward. The rope would slowly unravel behind it, and sailors would count how many knots passed through their hands over a fixed amount of time. The faster the ship moved, the more knots passed by, and that's where the term knots comes from. It wasn't just a name. It was literally how speed was measured. But here's where it gets even more precise. The knots on the rope weren't random. They were spaced at specific intervals, and the timing was carefully controlled, often using a simple sand timer when everything was calibrated correctly. Counting those knots gave sailors a surprisingly accurate estimate of their speed over time. This method became standardized. Each knot came to represent 1 nautical mile per hour, and that leads to something even more interesting. A nautical mile isn't like a regular mile. It's based on the shape of the Earth itself, specifically the distance along lines of latitude. 1 nautical mile is equal to 1 minute of latitude, which makes it directly connected to how we measure distance across the globe. Because of that, using knots makes navigation across oceans much simpler and more accurate. For example, if a ship is traveling at 20 knots, it means it's covering 20 nautical miles every hour, and since a nautical mile is linked to the Earth's coordinates, it fits naturally with how distances are calculated on global maps. That's something kilometers per hour or miles per hour don't align with as neatly when navigating long distances across oceans or through the air. That's why even today modern ships still use knots, not because they're stuck in the past, but because it actually works better for navigation, and it doesn't stop at the sea. Airplanes also use knots for the exact same reason, since they travel across countries and continents. Using nautical miles keeps everything consistent with global navigation systems. When a pilot says they're flying at 500 knots, it's based on the same logic sailors used centuries ago. So, the next time you hear that a ship is moving at 20 knots, or a plane is flying at 100 knots, are not just hearing a speed measurement, you're hearing a system that started with sailors, ropes, simple tools, and the open ocean, and evolved into something that still guides ships and aircraft around the world today. If you enjoy learning the hidden reasons behind everyday things, feel free to subscribe. There's a lot more like this coming.